Hey guys, today we're going to carve this guy. This little wood spirit or grizzly kind of looking guy. They're a lot of fun to make. You can make them wacky and crazy. Here's another one I did. They're a lot of fun, and you can experiment with facial expressions and their mouth and their teeth and all types of cool things. So let's get into it. I'm going to be carving one of these types of faces and a block. Maybe we'll make it a little bit of a wood spirit, a little bit different than this guy, but this is our reference. I'm using a 2" by 2" by 4" block. It was square and I just sliced it in half on the bandsaw. So to start off, what I like to do with these is I like to knock off all the edges because it creates a lot of discomfort in your hands when you're holding it. So I just knock off the sharp corners initially. On all sides. Just to make it a little bit more comfortable to hold. And I never really like to measure anything out, but we're gonna keep it pretty simple. Spot for the eyes, spot for the nose, and we'll figure out the bottom of this face later. So I'm just gonna start by creating that section for the eyes. Couple of stop cuts will get you there. Establish the bottom of his nose. One thing about carving on these corner pieces, you can move a lot of material really quickly. And you can get a project done in a fairly reasonable amount of time. Now I like to go fairly deep for his nose, just so it sticks out. Now you could do this as a knife only project and, you know, create a spot for his eyes like that. I've found that it's a little bit challenging at times, so I tend to use one of these U-shaped gouges to just come across. Come all the way across. Notch out a spot for where his eyes go. Just like that. You can also use that same U-shaped gouge to establish the sides of his nose, just by going straight up like that. Now I'm digging in fairly deep to create that. You could do it in much shallower passes. I'm just trying to speed this along a little bit. Just gonna come back in and knock off those high points, round off the nose. And we have his eyes, sides of his nose already established in just a few minutes. Now, you want to start to set in his nostrils. You can do that with the knife. Just come in at an angle on each side. And you can just come straight up into that. create the flares of his nose. Now I'm just going to kind of draw in the sides of his nostrils just to establish that. Now you could use a gouge to get that shape if you want. I'm going to just stick with a knife and just carefully trace around my pencil line like that. I'm just going to kind of pop that chip out. Just like that. Now creating that cut kind of helps us establish his cheek. Just draw that in, down, and then up. And again, you can just do a couple of stop cuts following that outline. So I do a cut inward and then from his cheek down into it. I like to pop out those chips because we're trying to round off his cheeks here. Do the same on the other side. Just like that. Establish his cheeks. Do a little bit of cleanup. Okay. Next thing I'm gonna do is I kind of like to draw in the mustache. It's nice to have center lines as well to keep things pretty symmetrical. But let's give him the same type of mustache where it curls around. So we'll come down and we'll just draw a nice sweeped up mustache. Same on the other side. Do your best to keep it symmetrical if you can. It doesn't really matter though. Could also remove a good amount here. And oh, we also want to do the top. We want to remove a good amount there, flatten that up a bit. And we want to establish where his hairline will be. So probably about there, maybe a little higher because he needs eyebrows. So top of his head, do another couple of V notches. Establish that hairline. Come on the sides, angling downward because we want to give it that sloped face. Same thing on the other side, sloped downward. Now this is a kind of standard type face that can be applied to any type of wood spirit or Santa or anything you want it to be, really. I'm going to just kind of go in and round off that nose. You can get crazy with the nose. You can, like this guy, I gave him a little bit of a bumped out swooping nose. I might not do that with this guy, but thin it out. Maybe round it off a little bit. Go too crazy with the nose. You can scoop out a section there. Scoop out a section there. All right. What you can do next, if you want to, it's a little bit uncomfortable to hold because it's so blocky. I kind of want to establish a mark where his hairline is going to be. So a good place is just right around the eyes here, maybe the midsection between the eyes and the nose there. And I'm going to just come in and knock off a big chunk out of the sides there. Just like that. Same thing on the other side. Now you don't have to rush, take your time with it. And we could start rounding off the blockiness of his head here, because he is going to have hair and it doesn't have to be all blocky. This is a little bit of a tough piece of basswood. Sometimes taking smaller cuts, it's a lot easier than taking off bigger chunks. Gets you there a little bit faster too. Doesn't hurt your hand as much. I'm gonna really round this off here because I want him to have a triangle shaped head. Remove all those saw marks. Helps if your knife is sharp and freshly stropped. All right, we got his head somewhat rounded off there. Now I just want to establish the rest of his face here. And draw it on. So if you look at people's faces, their face narrows where your eyes are. That's where your temples would be of your head. So it's a little bit narrower there and kind of comes back out wider where your cheeks are. So that's why you see me drawing it like this. It's a lot easier to get the shape needed if you draw it out first. So I'm going to just extend my lines there a little bit. And then I'm going to just trace roughly where I drew my line. And again, take out a little piece of wood right around that line. Make sure you pay attention to the grain direction here so it doesn't rip out like it just did for me. Just like that. Same thing on the other side. So I'm just gonna trace my line. Then I'm gonna come in at an angle and remove that chunk of wood from the inside of the face into the hair. Again, make sure you go with the grain. You don't want any pieces ripping out here in his face. You have to dig down a little deeper and alter the face. That's not really something you want to do if you can help it. Okay. You could round off his nostrils again because you kind of lose some of that. So we're just going to come around, round off the nostrils. Remove some wood where the cheeks and the nostrils meet. Now you could do a couple things here. You could just keep rounding it. I like to do these little triangle cuts where I'll come in where the nostril is, and I'll come in up towards following how the natural flow of the nose, and then I'll just come across and pop that chip out. So I come where the nostril curve is, like that, and then another cut following the length of the nose, and then come in, pop out that chip. If you want, you could do his nostrils now, or you could wait for later. You could use the tip of your knife. Again, sort of like a triangle cut. You come in one angle, come in another angle, and then you can just clean that up and pop that out. Another really easy way is if you do have a gouge, you can just use that gouge. I found it easier to use the gouge, but you can do it either way. Just clean up the chips, round off some of the hard edges. And you have a nose. All right, we're moving quickly through this one. Usually I take my time a little bit more, but for the sake of the video, I don't know, I'm just kind of going through it pretty quickly because I don't want it to be a long video. I'm gonna just round over some of those hard edges in his face. Again, you can go back in with your gouge. Kind of just reestablish where his eye sockets are. Create some depth and some layering here. Eyes are the most difficult part for me. I struggle a lot with eyes. I do experiment and do a few different things. I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do right now for this one, but we'll get there. Again, I'm just knocking off some of the hard edges from his face, removing some saw marks. So another thing we need to do is separate his eyebrows. Again, the easiest way is to use some sort of gouge. Not necessary. Again, you can do almost everything with the knife. You just have to spend a little bit of time picking at it. But I have the tools. I'm sure most of you have the tools. This is a little bit more advanced than a beginner project, so you should have some more gouges and tools. So I'm gonna just separate his eyebrows right there, and then I'm gonna do a stop cut to create the top of his eyebrow. One way. Another way. You can round over the top of his eyebrows there, his forehead, into where his hair is. And you can just, super simple. We're doing everything real simple today. We're just making a bunch of stop cuts, cutting into those lines, cleaning it up, and then just rounding over all the hard edges. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing to the other side. We're gonna just do a stop cut where the eyebrow is. Come in. Round over. Clean up. There we go. We have 2 eyebrows. Real simple to do. You don't have to overcomplicate things. Just get the basic shapes and you will be good. Just cleaning things up a little bit, rounding stuff off. Anything that kind of looks weird you want to get rid of. And the more of these you do, the better you will get at them. So just take your time and keep doing it. That nose is a little too wide, so we're going to use our gouge and come in from the sides. Clean up some of those chips from the inside there. Okay, we have his eye sockets put in. We can now draw where his eyes will be, which are roughly where those eye sockets are. Helps if your pencil is sharp. Mine isn't. And we'll leave his eyes for later, so we can just focus on some other aspects. Knock off any of these high points. And now we can start on his mustache. I'm going to start by notching out his mustache here. You can trace around it with your knife like that. Might be a little bit easier. And then just carefully undercut that. You don't have to be super accurate because we are going to round over his mustache. But this is a part where we're going to be going with the grain and against the grain, so things can get a little bit tricky. So you might have to switch up how you're making your cuts. And we're going to just remove the material from underneath. If you have a gouge, it's helpful. You can pick away a lot easier at it, like that. Again, not necessary. Okay, what you do to one side, you do to the other. So we're going to now cut the other side of his mustache. Just like that. Since I have my gouge, I'm going to just use it to remove material. And I'll just go back in and I'll clean up those chips that are left. Okay. Okay, now that we have his mustache set in, we got to decide what we want to do. If we want to give him an open mouth, if we want to give him a beard. I don't know. Let's give him some buck teeth. Something silly. And cut those teeth in. So we just drew them on, doesn't matter. Shape, style, whatever you feel like. I'm just winging it as I go along. And because we want his teeth to protrude outward, we gotta block them in. Make it come in on the sides here. Other side. All right. Now we want to separate his teeth. Again, everything is just cut into those pencil lines. It's that simple. You don't have to overcomplicate things. Use whatever tools you have or techniques you're comfortable using. Everyone has their own style, own method. Here can get a little bit tricky because my blade is a little too wide to fit in between those buck teeth, but we will get there little by little. Coming in at both ends. May have to cut in underneath the mustache again. And then just pop those chips out. It's helpful if you have a smaller detail knife, but again, you can get by with just about any knife that you have on hand. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just take your time. Use the tools you have. And a little bit of patience will get you there. All right, we got his weird teeth in. I want to round these teeth over. On both sides. Round them off at the bottom. You can give them a little bit more shape if you want, a little roundness, then wouldn't hurt. This guy's got some wonky teeth, man. Okay. A little bit of cleanup around the teeth. All right, we can round off this mustache. You could also round it off here on top. You'll have to go in from both angles. Don't forget right here. And again, I'm just kind of speeding through this guy. Usually I take a lot more time with these, but I don't have a ton of time to spend on this today. Okay. Round over the rest of his mustache and get rid of all the pencil lines and saw marks. Knock off all the high spots. Rounding them off there. Round it off there. You could separate his mustache into two if you want. In fact, yeah, let's do that. So it's pretty simple. Just go in with your knife and do a little V-cut. Now his mustache is split in two. And you can really do anything with these guys. Like I said, you can turn them into a Santa, you can add a hat, you can give them hair, you can make them bald, whatever you want to do. This guy's kind of already set up to have hair. So, you know, hair is kind of grouped together. You can see on this guy, I notched out some of those groupings. So real simple. You can just go in anywhere and cut out these little triangle notches. Doesn't have to be any rhyme or reason to it. I mean, sometimes you want to pay attention to how the hair is going to flow, which direction you want it to go in, but it's just a carving. You can do whatever you want. Don't take it so serious. Sometimes it's okay to just do random things and hope for the best. Doesn't turn out well, who cares? Start again. All right, cut a bunch of these little random V notches. Once I do that, I'll round over, let me see. Yeah, let me give him another little V notch down here. Yeah, why not? Start rounding some of these edges over because it is hair. I want it to look like it's coming out from the side of his head. Yeah, round that over. These are already pretty rounded. One. Okay, we are just moving along with this guy. So I'm gonna just kind of follow the natural flow of where these points are going. So that point looks like it's going this way. This one looks like it's going upward. This one is curving that way. That one's going this way, and that one swoops up. Now, if you had a V tool, you could use that. I don't have mine with me right now, so I'm going to just use the knife and come in at both angles, following that pencil line. You want to be careful up here because this is all end grain, At this point, it's a little bit tough to cut into. So take your time. Don't force anything that doesn't feel comfortable. And yeah, just be careful with what you're doing, because you can easily slip up and cut yourself in this spot. We got, and you can see I'm not following my pencil lines exactly. I'm just using it as a reference. Taking out chunks. All right, we got this guy now. And you can see I'm flipping this guy around upside down, left, right. I'm flipping it all around because I'm finding the best possible way to hold the piece that is comfortable while also making sure I'm not going to hurt myself. So you see I constantly flip the piece around to make certain cuts, because I don't want to make a cut in a particular spot that's uncomfortable for me to hold and grab. Like up here is very difficult to hold the piece, get leverage. So I'll switch grips, I'll take smaller bites, I'll flip it around upside down. If there's any point when you're trying to make a cut where you feel like it's not safe, just don't make that cut. Just stop for a second, think about it, spin it around a few times, see what's a much more comfortable position to hold it in. All right, we got his last little hair wave here to worry about. Okay, and let's connect. Give a nice separation from his hair to his beard area. Same thing on this side. Whoa. I don't think I'm going to give this guy a bottom lip. I'm going to just leave his teeth jutting out the way they are. So I'm going to just clean this up. Get a little bit more separation from his mustache and his beard. Clean up all the fuzzy chips that are in there. All right. We are almost done with this guy. Now, obviously, you could do a lot more to these guys. You can add a lot of details. You can make them smoother, you make them more animated. All right, let's see. Pick out his nose a little bit more. All right, his beard. You can do a ton of different stuff. You can round it. You can make it flowy and all different types of angled cuts. This guy, gave him a lot of extra details under the hair. Maybe we'll do that. I'm gonna just start by knocking off a lot of this excess material that we don't need. You want to round off the bottom here. Now because it's a beard, some of these random cuts and facets help out a lot more because you want the beard to have a flow to it and texture and depth and layering. So you don't have to be consistent, really taking off equal amounts of cuts, and just kind of, you can see I'm just kind of hacking away. And we'll see where that kind of gets us. You can see also I'm just removing the extra saw cut marks, pencil lines, just roughing it into a shape that I think looks good. Yeah. I think that's good. Just round off bottom section here, get rid of those saw marks. Again, a little bit more texture. All right, I'm gonna give this guy a little bit of a rounder beard shape. Okay, now before we move on to texturing his hair and his beard and stuff, let's get his eyes set in. Now you could do a lot of different things with his eyes, like I said. I'm gonna just keep it simple. This is a kind of trick I learned. I don't know if it's a trick, but I saw someone do this where you're gonna just take your point of your knife at an angle, go in one way, go in the opposite way, creating a little V, and then you're just gonna pop out that inside corner. Same thing on the other side. You're gonna go in one angle, at other angle, and then you're just gonna pop out that chip. Same thing on the other side of his eye. One angle in, other angle, pop out that chip. Other eye, angle, angle, chip. And that's like a very basic way to get eyes set in. Now, the part that's a little challenging is you want to now connect those two corner pieces. So you use the tip of your knife to trace around the top. You would trace around the bottom. And then you would just kind of round over that eyeball. You might have to go back and forth a few times to get the chip out. I don't know if I'm explaining this well enough. It's a little bit of a difficult thing to explain, but you're just tracing like an oval shape for the eye, and then you're just rounding off that inside eye. eyeball, I should say, on the top and the bottom. Again, like I said, you might have to go back and forth a few times, use a little bit of a delicate hand. It helps if your knife is really sharp, and then you have his eyeball set in. See the difference? So again, I'm going to do it on this side where I trace and connect the two triangle cuts I made. I do it on the top. I do it on the bottom. Just connect those two. And then I just very gently take out little slivers to round off that eyeball. Top and bottom. Now you could go a little bit crazier and add pupils and all that stuff. I find for these guys, most of the time you're gonna paint them, I think, and you can just kind of paint the pupil and the iris or whatever it's called. So I tend to just leave them like this. I think it gives it a cooler look, but you can draw something in if you want to visualize it. You could also take an awl or a small drill bit and just drill those eyeballs in, little puncture holes for his eyes. Let's get his face set back in here. Same thing on this side. We lost a little bit of his separation from his cheek and his hair. Kind of like the red eyes on this. Gives it a little bit of a creepy look. Okay. Now, one of my favorite parts is actually texturing the beard and the mustache and stuff. So I do it this way, which is pretty simple. I will draw a bunch of random flowy lines that I think look pretty cool. Just like that. Doesn't matter which way you go. Try to keep it consistent in the same flowing direction, but again, doesn't matter. It's just carving. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate. And then I do it in a few stages. I take usually I like to use a much bigger gouge, but this is what I have on hand. And I will then kind of follow in between those lines I just drew and remove material. Just like that. Remember, you don't have to be exact. You don't have to follow everything exactly the same. The wood's gonna splinter off and change. Just adapt. So you see how I'm just kind of following this flow of the lines that I drew, and I'm gonna start to define things a little bit more, give it a little bit more texture and shape with this gouge. So just like that. I'm gonna just do the rest now. Careful not to break those teeth we spent time cutting in. Again, this is a point where you're kind of cutting into end grain again. So you have to watch the grain direction and where you're going and how you're cutting it. So just take your time. Go back and forth if you need to. Again, change the grip if you need. So I'm creating both high points and low points throughout the beard, Because remember, this guy's a little bit of a wild man. His beard is pretty unkempt. All right, we're getting there. Last couple of spots. Okay, there we go. Created a nice textured beard. That's phase one of the beard detailing. So just establish a rough, kind of gouged out look. Then I come in with a smaller gouge. And I kind of will follow a similar path of how the flow is going. And I'll do it in a couple of different directions. Careful not to slip. And I'm just kind of going into that valley that I created with the bigger gouge. But I'm going to start splitting things off, and I'm going to start turning things and doing different flows. You know, so maybe I'll come in one way and I'll start to curve it and twist it. Do these S shapes that are pretty common with hair. Kind of fighting all different grain directions when doing this, so find what's best. You don't want to rip anything out. You don't want to hurt yourself. You know, and every once in a while, just stop what you're doing, take a look back. And you see how we're creating a lot more texture now? And don't be afraid to dig deep with this and get really in there. You can't really mess this up. You have it split in all different directions. Really create a lot of peaks and valleys. Just like that. Now the third phase of the beard, which I like to do. Now you could do it two ways. The easiest way is with a V-tool or a veiner. I prefer the veiners. But you could also do it with the tip of your knife if you have the patience, where you will come in all the way in those lowest valleys you created, and you're gonna just take little slivers out, and you're gonna create a lot more depth and detail. And you really want to go deep and really define a lot of the shapes that you just created. That's what gives this guy all that extra detail everywhere. It's a little time consuming with the knife, which is why I say to use a veiner or a V-tool. I don't have my V-tool with me right now. So I'm gonna just use the tip of my knife. But the V-tool makes super quick work of this. And you don't be afraid to come around the back and dig in here to create even more depth. Shadow lines when it's up against the wall or a magnet, fridge. And you can have these lines do whatever you want. You can have them split 3 or 4 different ways. You can have them long, short. You can add them on the top here, like a little section here. You can give it a little scoop out. When you get to the bottom, you can take these little V cuts out, create even more depth. Like here's a good spot for it. Just like that. And just, yeah. Do what you think looks right, what looks cool. You can leave it. You don't have to add this detail. I like to add the detail because it's my favorite part of the carving. I feel like it really brings a piece to life when you add the details. And you see how much like extra texture and layering I'm getting by doing this? Don't be afraid to tuck things under and scoop things out. All right, I'm gonna just speed this up here a little bit because I don't want it to take too long. So I'm gonna just cut these in. It's also one of those spots when if you're doing with a knife, you don't really want to dig in deep too much, like keep going back and forth with it, because you'll create a lot of fuzzy mess in there. That's really hard to pick out, which is again is why I prefer the veiner. Just one pass and you're done. All right. Now the same thing I did in his beard is what I do in his hair as well. Same 3-step layering, texturing process. I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but this is the best and easiest way I've found, and I think looks the best. All right. I should really be wearing some sort of glove or finger tape because it is a hot day and the knife keeps slipping in my hand. All right, I'm just gonna remove some of these pencil lines. You can texture the beard a little bit more with the knife, creating more facets and just like that. I would do the same thing to the mustache. Scoop it out any different direction you want. I'm gonna leave his mustache a little bit plain like that, and just end the video here. Again, same thing with the eyebrows before we go. You just want to round those eyebrows off. If you have a small U-gouge or a veiner, this is again, or a V-tool, this is the best spot for it. Again, I don't have it with me. You could just use your knife. You can do little V-cuts to establish hair texture. You could leave it, you know, just take little bit of cuts. Obviously on this guy, I, you know, did a lot more to him, but this could easily be a knife only project. You just may have to take your time, try a little bit of a different tactic on certain things. You obviously can't do a lot of the scooping that we did on the beard with a knife only, but you can get kind of close. I actually kind of like keeping his eyebrows simple like this. It's not something I've ever really tried before. But that's the great thing about these types of projects. You can just keep trying new things, different things, try different ways to cut in the eyes. You can give them little eye bags if you want and make them tired, and really do a lot to define the face and the shape. You can give them a little scar if you want. Let's give them a little battle wound here, just to show that you can do whatever you want. Maybe this guy was mauled by a bear. There, he's got a little eye scar. Maybe just soften it up so you can see it a little better. And that's it, you know, round off his hair. Add some details to the hair. Do whatever you want. And that's it. We're gonna call this guy done. There's your intermediate type of hillbilly wood spirit type carving. Whatever he is, I don't know. They're a lot of fun. You can try some really cool things. Give it a try. We'll see you in the next one.